Absolutely. So as you may be able to tell, I'm originally not from the United States. I'm from England. And in 1981, my boyfriend and I, he was my boyfriend at the time and then became my business partner. We were inspired to move to California. We had heard about this American dream. And we just felt that the United States of America was an amazing place to come to where the opportunities were limitless. And so we arrived in 1981, didn't really have a clue about anything or what we were going to do. We just burned with this vision to fulfill our potential and experience the American dream. So within 2 years, we'd started our first company. We were both quite entrepreneurial, as were our parents. And then we started another company a couple of years later. And towards the end of the 80s, about 89, I woke up one day. Company number one was gone. Company number two was nearly gone. The relationship was over, and I was personally bankrupt. So at that time, Mary Lou, it looked more like an American nightmare. And I just couldn't understand why it was that this dream wasn't becoming a reality.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Mary Lou Kaiser here. And it is game day at the Play Your Position podcast, which means I have an extraordinary guest who is ready to share her wisdom, her insights, her tactics and techniques for how we can all show up and play a bigger game that is authentic, that is satisfying, and that gets us the results we are looking for. Her name is Susan James. Susan, are you ready for kickoff?
Absolutely. I love your theme and winning, winning, winning.
Yes. Oh, well, it's so great to have you here. So team, here are some things that I know about Susan. First of all, she is a self-discovery trainer. In 2002, she and her partner co-founded the Self-Discovery Group, LLC. They and their team of licensed self-discovery trainers and coaches train visionary and ambitious people who are committed to fulfilling their limitless potential. The self-discovery life mastery process is a very simple yet highly effective strategy made up of experiential and practical techniques that support people to manage themselves in today's fast-paced world and to develop the skills to live life more deliberately. Who doesn't want that? So Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Mary Lou. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
It is. So right out of the gate, I would love for you to share with us your story, Susan, about when you got the call to leadership. You are leading in your business. You are working with extraordinary human beings to help them elevate into a higher level of consciousness. In our pre-chat, we were talking about these things. And so give us that inside look at your story of becoming the leader that you are today.
Absolutely. So as you may be able to tell, I'm originally not from the United States. I'm from England. And in 1981, my boyfriend and I, he was my boyfriend at the time and then became my business partner. We were inspired to move to California. We had heard about this American dream. And we just felt that the United States of America was an amazing place to come to where the opportunities were limitless. And so we arrived in 1981, didn't really have a clue about anything or what we were going to do. We just burned with this vision to fulfill our potential and experience the American dream. So within 2 years, we'd started our first company. We were both quite entrepreneurial, as were our parents. And then we started another company a couple of years later. And towards the end of the 80s, about 89, I woke up one day. Company number one was gone. Company number two was nearly gone. The relationship was over, and I was personally bankrupt. So at that time, Mary Lou, it looked more like an American nightmare. And I just couldn't understand why it was that this dream wasn't becoming a reality. I look back now, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me because it woke me up. It had me realize that the dream was not outside of me, but inside. And that was really my awakening. And that was what began my quest to find out, what is it that has people be successful? What is it that has two people who seemingly have the same background and opportunities? One ends up as a multimillionaire and the other ends up as a druggie in the gutter. And I really began to explore the differences between human beings. And it's a long story, but it basically led me to Florida in the very late 1990s. And in 2001, I met the person who's my business partner, Rob James. And I had been on a quest. I'd listened to remember those tapes, Mary Lou? Cassette tapes?
Oh, yes.
I'd read books, I'd listened to tapes, I'd gone to seminars, but somehow I just couldn't find the answer. So when I met Rob, I noticed two things. Number one was he was operating from a quiet mind. Now, I'd heard about meditation, but I'd never been able to quiet my mind enough to meditate. So when I met Rob and I could experience this quiet mind that he had, I'm going like, whoa, that is what I'm looking for. The other thing I noticed was that his vision was bigger than mine. It was the biggest vision that I had ever heard somebody having. And that was the vision of an enlightened civilization. And so within several months, when we met, he was in the process of putting together what is now called the self-discovery life mastery process and the self-discovery techniques. And since 2002, we have created great success. And our greatest success is having an amazing team of self-discovery trainers and coaches and a community that we call the Heroes Community. These are our most advanced participants, and several thousand people have gone through our training, and their lives have been profoundly impacted by their ambition and drive to fulfill their potential. So that is sort of that is the version, or that's what got me to where I am today.
It is such an inspiring story. I love that you've been a person who's willing to take risks. And even when things didn't go according to plan, and I have a question about that we'll get to in a minute, because I'm sure there's other times in your life when you found yourself looking around saying, this is not what I thought it would be. But we'll get back to that in a minute. Something that you said caught my attention, Susan, and that is the search. You recognized, you didn't say that you used the word bankrupt, I think, on a couple of levels. It wasn't just financially, but I sense that you were also emotionally, just spiritually bankrupt. The whole ball of wax, like you were at ground zero, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so for people listening who perhaps are feeling that way right now because of the way the world is, given our circumstances and conditions that, in all fairness, we didn't choose for ourselves. But I know enough about you from our short pre-chat that you are like me in that you believe we create our reality. How we respond to things is what shapes the experience that we have. And so it is hard for a lot of people right now. What is something that folks who are listening who might be feeling that emotional, even physical bankruptcy, what can they do to begin that journey out of that towards fulfillment, towards the richness that you and your partner and many of the people you work with experience every day?
Well, I believe that just as I had a wake-up call, you said something just now about things not looking the way the mind expected them to. I had never spoken to somebody who said, in response to my question, does your life look the way that you expected it to say yes? Because the mind's frame of reference is the past. And so I believe that my wake-up call was the story that I just told. I believe that the world is going through that right now. And there are two types of responses. Well, let me back up a second. So the construct of the physical universe that we are in is dual in nature. You can't have day without night, good without bad, happy without sad.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to get to tomorrow, we have to go through tonight. Now, the challenge that human beings have is that they don't like feeling bad. But the reality, right? I mean, nobody likes feeling bad. But the reality is that in order to feel more good, you have to experience the night. You have to go through the night. So the people who are getting to the end of the day and the sun is going down and it's beginning to get dark, the people who resist that are the people who suffer. Right now, with what's happening, this awakening, which is what I believe that it is. I believe it is an awakening. It's a tap on the shoulder that didn't get acknowledged. And so now, boom, it is a major awakening. For some people, Mary Lou, the last few months have been an amazing experience. I've heard stories of families who have spent time together, playing cards, playing games, eating dinner together, that didn't do that because they were so busy living life. And so many people are having a profound experience, and there are many that are very, very challenged. So I believe that this is an opportunity, just as I did in the late 80s, to step back and to really look at what your life is about. What I love about your theme of football playing is that I believe a lot of people have been playing in the wrong position. They have been doing what they're doing because they thought they should. And I was full of that, believe me. I thought I should be this, I should be that, as opposed to just being myself and tapping into my own unique, because every single one of us is as unique as a snowflake. The more that we can tap into being ourselves, being who we're here to be, because I believe a lot of people are asking themselves the big questions. What is the purpose of life? What am I here for? How can I make a difference? And I believe the number one thing, the most important thing, is to become the best that you can be. Again, going back to your theme, I believe that winning at life or playing the biggest game there is and winning is what it's about. However, as I experienced, I had to go through failure, which is like going through the night to go to the next day. You know, we talked about that Three's Company podcast that you did. And one of the things you talked about was you said that nobody, you know, they see the end product, right? The half-hour show. They see the wonderful end product. But what they don't see is the thousands of hours of practice that goes into that. Mm-hmm. They don't see, as you said, the locker room. You know, I think it was one of the most successful golf players. I heard that after a tournament, after he'd won the tournament, you know what he did? He went right back out onto the green to practice his putting. Mm-hmm. So becoming the best you can be, being aligned with yourself, becoming your own BFF, because, right?
Right.
And it's a BFF that you never have to get rid of, right? You might want to get rid of. But going back to duality, Mary Lou, Do you remember the cartoons with the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other?
Yes.
Nobody beats us up, criticizes us, puts us down more than ourselves.
It's so true.
Right?
Yep. I was just having a conversation with some women yesterday about that very thing. And we talked about the inner critic and how loud and obnoxious and ever present that inner critic can be if we allow that inner critic the space to roam free and just have their way with us, versus the inner mentor or the inner coach, who is the one that's encouraging us to get back out there. So what if you didn't make so what if you didn't catch the pass? So what if you just failed at whatever it may be? Get back out there. You got this. You got this. I'm curious, Susan, one of my key questions that I'm always so interested to hear how people respond to this question has to do with the coaching relationship that you have experienced and the benefit that you have had from learning from others. You were talking about cassettes, and those of us of a certain age remember cassettes and the cassette tapes, those self-improvement cassettes, the programs that are available. Was there a certain person that you felt was instrumental in leading you towards that pivotal year of 2001? I know 2001 was that watershed year for you where things all came together, but it wouldn't have come together had you not been doing that work in the previous decade. So is there somebody or a program that was instrumental to you? I'm so curious.
Well, to be honest, there were many. I was looking everywhere. There were many. And as you said so relevantly, I got something from everything. But there was a little piece here and a little piece there and a little piece over there. And they really didn't come together. Mm-hmm. It was really when I met Rob and he started to train me in the very simple techniques to manage my consciousness that things began to shift. And just to go back to you're talking about like the inner critic and then the inner mentor, in my world, what you're referencing is thinking and intuitive wisdom or intuitive guidance. And Mary Lou, one of the things that nobody talks about, or not nobody, very few people talk about, is what I believe is the number one addiction right now on the planet, and that is thinking. When I met Rob, the volume on my thinking was so loud that I really couldn't hear my intuitive guidance. I mean, I heard it a little bit, otherwise I wouldn't have created him showing up. But I believe that this addiction is very tied into the information age. 100 years ago, people were working the fields, they were getting up with the sun, they were working, it was the agricultural age, a little over 100 years ago. And the skills to be successful, to be able to survive in those days, those skills were very different than the skills that were applicable to the industrialization age. When the industrialization age came along, factories, machines, the skills from the agricultural age were no longer relevant for the industrialization age. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And then if you move into the 60s and 70s, you move into the technology age. I mean, there were these geeks, with these wooden boxes that we now call computers, and there were very few of them, but they were working hard. You look at Steve Jobs, you look at Bill Gates, they saw the vision, and they developed the skills to really what has led to the information age. And now the information age, I believe, is coming to an end, because don't you have access to any information that you want, Mary Lou?
Yeah, that's people have been talking about that for a little while now, that we can access information anywhere, anytime, on any device. Exactly.
But having that information, people are beginning to realize that having that information doesn't make a difference.
No, it doesn't.
And if you want to make $1 million, if you want to lose weight, if you want to get more fit, there's thousands of pages on how to do it. But why is it that people don't do it? So that's why these skills we call the self-discovery techniques and self-discovery life mastery process the skills of the future. Because the skills that we've learned to get us to where we are now, they are different, and we have to let go of those in order to master the skills of the future. And I believe the ultimate game on this planet is the game of self-mastery.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that mastering oneself, mastering one's emotions, one's attention creates your reality. Let me give you an example. So put your attention right now on the Statue of Liberty.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
So right now, your attention, or you're fragmented. Your body is in Portland, Oregon, or near Portland, right?
Yep.
But your attention is on the Statue of Liberty. Now, this is how people are living their lives. Their body is in one place, but their attention is somewhere else. When they're in front of somebody who's talking to them, they're thinking about what they're going to say next, or they're thinking about something completely different. So being present and aware, I believe, is the ultimate beingness, or the ultimate way to be. And it is a skill, Mary Lou. It is simply a skill. And a lot of people, back in 2002, meditation was not a common word. In today's world, a lot of people are meditating. I don't use the word mindfulness because I sort of laugh a little bit at it, because it's not about having a full mind.
Got it.
About having an empty mind. But a lot of people are meditating that, which is great. However, once you know how to quiet the mind, it's pretty easy to do that. The next domain is managing your consciousness, because again, going back to duality, you have what feels good and you have what does not feel good. So being able to manage what doesn't feel good and be able to release it, and we have a very simple strategy to be able to do that. That is what creates a space for you to be able to put your attention and live from your dreams, from your purpose, to be on purpose, to live deliberately, and to fulfill the unique purpose that you are on this planet to fulfill, just as you're doing right now. I love what you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm curious, do you think that in order to start the journey and continue the journey into self-mastery and the self-discovery process, that a person needs to go through what I call the dark night of the soul, which is what you were describing? And that's from the heroic journey, that at some point the hero or heroine just has to descend into darkness. It could be literal. It's often metaphorical. It's often both.
Uh-huh.
And then when he or she emerges from that, the way the world appears is completely different, as is the way the individual now performs, interacts, engages with the world. So is that a necessary part, or can people in this high-tech world just skip that stage? I just want to skip that stage and hack my way towards it.
Well, a couple of things. Joseph Campbell comes to mind. Or you're familiar with him, but the hero's journey. And to answer your question, I believe that it's about karma. I believe that karma is the lessons that we're here to learn. I heard it once said that life's the only time when you get the test before the lesson.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I thought you might. And then there's Dharma. Dharma, these are both Vedic terms. Dharma is our purpose. And I believe that, yes, we do have to go through karma, but I also believe that we come into this lifetime with different levels of karma. What my experience, and I train millennials, I train Gen Zers, we have a complete from like 18 to 80 years old as far as the spectrum of ages of our participants. And what I find is that the young ones, a lot of them, their karma is not as heavy. It is not as dense as some of us older ones.
Well, they haven't lived as long.
Yeah, and not that the two are related. I believe that each one of us has our own unique purpose, and so we have our own karma. But I believe that every single thing that we go through is our training for our purpose. I believe that life is actually a training exercise. So the worst things that have happened to me, or that I've created happening, because I'm not a victim, is actually those are the best things. Those are the things that I've learned the most from. And now I really don't see problems. I just see opportunities. And never before, I believe, had there been greater opportunities to find solutions. I believe, Mary Lou, that's why human beings create a problem, is in order to find a solution. And I believe that everything that is here on this planet has a solution. And there are many people who have amazing solutions, but their limiting beliefs are holding them back. I asked somebody this the other day. I said, tell me about your child. They had like a, 1-year-old or so. And I said, what's the first thing that happened when that child started walking? The first time the child stood up, what happened? And the mother said, well, he fell over. And so I said, right. Now, he didn't at that point say, right, I'm done. I'm not going to try that again, right? But I'm done with this walking thing, right? I'm just going to keep crawling. No, he got back up again. But as we go through life, stuff happens. Things happen that don't feel good. We have heartbreak. We have loss. We have failure. And there are many people that they have an amazing dream and they start moving towards that dream, and then they hit resistance. And you know what? That's when they give up. They give up their dream. And that's where, I believe a cemetery is the place where you can find the most unfulfilled dreams. So our strategy shows people how they can manage their limitations, their sabotage patterns, because I believe that those sabotage patterns are exactly what they need to experience and integrate in order to become the next level of themselves. Does that all make sense?
It absolutely does.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
I'm wondering, how do people who work with you and your endeavor with the self-discovery, how do they come to you? Are they referred? Is someone encouraging them to, oh, you've got to, this is amazing? Or are they dragged by someone who says, you need this, because there's a difference between, and I think of my own life, times when I was dragged to something and resistance was absolutely, like, my guard was way up. Yeah. And then there were times when I was on the search and I would ask around, or I would just figure out a way to find something. Is there a difference, do you see, in the participants? I'm really, again, curious.
For sure. And I have to tell you, I've been the biggest dragger in the world. But I got over it now because, how can I put this? The motivation, what comes up is the motivation. And if you look at your limiting beliefs and sabotage patterns, one of mine, and I'm not going to go into the story as to how it happened, or how I created, but one of mine was that there's something wrong with me. Now, as long as I had that belief, that was what I got feedback for, which is why what happened in California is exactly what I got feedback for. There was something wrong with me and that I was a failure. And so these are a lot of these beliefs, by the way, are patterns that get handed down generation to generation. So in the beginning, my motivation was, I got to fix myself. There's something wrong with me. And of course, if I think there's something wrong with me, then I think there's something wrong with the world, right? Now, I have integrated enough of that to not be motivated by that. So feel the difference between there's something wrong, I need to fix it, compared to how can I take things to the next level?
So different.
Right? And well, that you see, there's only two things that motivate human beings. Number one is the resistance to feeling bad. Number two is the desire to feel good.
Right. Pain and pleasure.
Exactly. And so, yes, there are people who've been dragged, to be honest. If they didn't, well, let me back up. So I believe that if they're part of them that was ambitious and driven to grow had not been bigger than their resistance, and they could not literally physically have shown up in our training. Does that make sense?
It does.
Because the ego and the mind loves to hold on to resistance, and that's its job, separation. Again, going back to duality, that is simply its job. Now, the ego has got a very bad rap. Most people do not understand how it functions, and how it functions is this. When we're growing up, we learn certain strategies in order to survive. One of mine, for example, was I would turn into a little victim. I'd get a stomachache. I'd say, Mommy, can I stay home from school? I've got a stomachache. I don't feel good. Now that, my dear, was a brilliant strategy.
Sure. Used by millions of children everywhere.
Exactly. And when I realized this and I shared it with my mother, she said, oh my God, I did the same thing when I was a kid. So now that was fine at the time, but what the ego does is that it keeps a strategy in place. If a strategy is working, then it says, hey, we're going to keep working, we're going to keep playing this strategy out. Now, when I'm in my early 40s, I'm sitting in a business meeting and somebody pushes a button and makes me feel, and it's, of course, my creation that compels them to do that, but makes me feel like that 5-year-old and I turn into a victim, I do not get the job done. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So all the ego is doing is holding on to a strategy that at some point in the past was highly effective. And so by learning, it really comes down to understanding how we function as human beings. I'm talking to you through this computer. And listen, when I was first had a computer put in front of me, I didn't even know where the on button was. Mm-hmm. It couldn't do what I wanted it to do. Now it does exactly what I want it to do. But we are the same, Mary Lou. When we do not understand how we function, we can't do anything about it because we all fundamentally function the same way. Now, what's different about us is our filters. It's like software. Like mine is of a woman who's in South Florida, who's a self-discovery trainer, originally from England. Those are my pieces of software. Mm-hmm. But my operating system is exactly like yours and everybody else's. Is this making sense?
Yes. It's so fascinating.
In my world, self-mastery is simply about looking at your life, really taking an assessment of your life and looking at the areas that do not look the way that you'd like them to, that you'd prefer them to. And then to look at the limiting beliefs and the sabotage patterns that are creating that outcome. Now, as you become aware of them, then you can let them go and you can create a new reality. At the end of the day, Mary Lou, what changes the world is people who are tapped into their purpose and vision. You look at the most winning football players, it's those that are ambitious and driven. They want to be the best of the best. They want to win. And so that's my response to whatever it was you asked me.
Oh, I love this conversation. It's fascinating to me. And I think Team PYP, you guys are getting what I would consider the box seats to something that can truly make the difference between living an average life or a subpar life and an extraordinary life. And it's so simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. And Susan, you are clearly, I can tell, so passionate about this. You understand the way our brains, our minds, our subconscious, the ego, all those pieces to the puzzle. And it's not something we're taught in school. I was reflecting on this idea the other day when I was doing my morning writing, is unless you had a teacher in your schooling, which most people, at least as of now, have experienced school the way school has been. Now, I think that's changing as well, but that's a different conversation. Unless you had a guide, a teacher, a coach, or somebody who was enlightened enough to take you outside of the subject matter and delve into some of these bigger themes about succeeding in life, no one teaches how to examine yourself, to learn about the difference between the ego and the superego and all those, those patterns. And so people just become habitually, you use the word addicted in our pre-chat, and I think you even mentioned it now, is we become addicted to the way we have always thought and done things, rather than step back and say, now, wait a minute, is this really serving me? Is this why am I here? And letting go, you brought up that too. Letting go is extraordinarily difficult for people.
Oh, it can.
Because it's familiar.
Well, exactly. And what you're tapping into, Mary Lou, is that the greatest fear for human beings is the unknown. That is the greatest fear. And in order to experience something new, you have to let go of the unknown. So let's look back to the technology age. Now, those guys who are putting together those computers in the early days, people were saying, oh, I'll never do that. It'll never happen. But Bill Gates, he had a vision to see a computer on everybody's desk. And guess what? Now that is a reality. So in my world, what's happening is that this awakening, this realization that having the answers isn't what makes the difference, but mastering myself is the critical component for the skills of the future, and to learn those, to create a different reality. And people who are listening to this, you can feel me. And I also realized I didn't answer your prior question. And you asked, how do people come to self-discovery? Well, the thing is this, you may have noticed this, that when you're talking or you're having an experience with somebody who is more aware than most people, then you feel it. Now, if that's something that's not important to you, then you're not going to feel it. And a lot of people, they're still, how can I put it, in a little bit of a slumber.
Mm-hmm.
And those of us who are awakening, we are accelerating this awakening to the point where it is going to be normal in the future to have schools that actually teach skills for a human being to be able to live. It's going to be normal for everyone to have food to eat. It's going to be normal for people to have shelter. Because if you were somebody who just landed on this planet from somewhere else and you looked around, wouldn't you be asking yourself, what is going on?
Oh my gosh. I asked that anyway. And I've lived here.
I understand. But the thing is this, Mary Lou, it all begins with me. The more that I'm aligned with myself, the more that I can train and support people to be aligned with themselves. There was a statement many years ago that I remember hearing, just like you talked about those seeds. It was the good of the whole begins with the individual. Mm-hmm. And I so get that now. It's like the more that I am present, aware, and managing myself, and I'm focused and clear about my vision and purpose, the more that is going to literally vibrate out and create more people saying, hey, I want some of that. Those people who are ready. So to respond to your question, people come to us because either they meet a self-discovery trainer or coach, they listen to something like this, they maybe have a family member, or they have somebody that they work with, and they feel the difference with them. Because the greatest complaint I've heard about our process is that it works too well.
Well, that's not a bad thing at all. I'd take that complaint.
It is for the mind and the ego because it wants to stay stuck. It wants to stay stuck. And, one of the things that the mind and the ego really resist is greatness. Mm-hmm. Because the mind, it wants to pull down. Anyway, cut a long story short, the more present, aware a person is, the more they're mastering themselves, the more they're living from their intuitive guidance. I'm not planning what I'm going to say to you next. I have a very strong intention. The intention is getting the job done. The words are coming through me. Mm-hmm. The words that need to be heard by whoever it is that's listening, who's ready to hear them.
That's right.
Yeah.
I operate in that similar way as much as I can. The download is coming moment by moment. And I think that's when we see that in action as fans of, again, I'm a big sports fan. So I find it fascinating to watch teams who embody the presence. Mm-hmm. And you just see it, you're in the presence of all cylinders firing at the same time versus when there's chaos and confusion and people out of alignment for whatever reason. It really doesn't matter. That's the reality. And we're at the part of the show, Susan, that I call touchdown, which is when your team scores. That's one of the main reasons the teams play is to get that ball into the end zone. So I'm putting you in the red zone with less than 30 seconds left on the clock. You are down by 4 points. It's now or never. Would you tell us a story about a time when you metaphorically ran that ball into the end zone for the game-winning touchdown?
So this might not be the answer you'd like to hear or the mind would like to hear, but in my world, it's every day. It's right here. It's right now. I can reference the past, but being here right now, being present and aware is really what it's about. The now is all there is. In fact, as I'm saying that, it's now the next now. This moment.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say, you mentioned earlier, what can people do at this time? Ask yourself, who do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of world do you want to live in? What legacy do you want to live? Bo Jackson just comes to mind. Now, in my world, he was a superhuman being. And that in my world, that's what I'm committed to being. In this world, I'm committed to making a massive impact. And I know that there are people listening. There are people out there that in your heart, you are here for a way bigger purpose than your mind currently lets you live. So I believe that the ultimate touchdown is becoming yourself and contributing that to the world. That's all the world wants to see is the real you. Feel me?
I do. I feel you. And so for people listening, this question is tied again to football, but what are 1 to 3 key offensive strategies straight out of your leadership playbook, your self-discovery playbook, Susan, that listeners could implement right now to start that journey of self-discovery so that they can become more of themselves?
Do an evaluation. Look at your life. Ask yourself those questions. Who do I want to become? I believe that we can be whatever it is that we decide to. What kind of world do you want to live in? What kind of legacy do you want to live? I believe that sitting down with a piece of paper and a pen, and that is important, by the way. Taking notes on a pad or phone is not the same as writing with your hand.
Amen really, to that.
Contemplate on your life. Every one of us is here for a unique purpose. And I believe most people have had flashes of that. Any dream that you could conceive, believe, Napoleon Hill, right? Think and Grow Rich. Anything you could conceive, you can create. That's what I believe.
Yes. Yes. So interesting that you brought up pen to paper. Incredibly important. There's just a boatload of research, scientific research that shows by physically putting pen or pencil, crayon, colored marker, whatever, physically to a piece of paper and taking what's just taking what's in the mind, the brain, and putting it down, building that vision, building that dream is part of the process of actually making it become a reality. Now, I am curious because you talk about not spending too much time or any time in the past. When you pose that question to people, do you get playing devil's advocate here? Well, Susan, I want to base my dream on things that I've seen, which is from my past. You and I were doing an exercise in the pre-chat about imagine a beach. And you said, is that a beach? You asked, do you have one in your mind? I said, yes. Is it one you've been to before? Yes, it is. And so this is a fascinating space for me because things that have been created and invented that did not exist before are part of the vision of those who create. The iPhone, for example, the personal computer, you use that. Bill Gates had a vision of having one of these things on everybody's desk. The cryptocurrency that is becoming part of life, whether you like him or not, Jeff Bezos with Amazon. He started with books. It's become the biggest retailer on the planet. So how do you stimulate originality of vision versus pulling from the past?
So great question. None of the things you just talked about, the iPhone, computers, et cetera, came from the past.
No, they didn't. Right.
So in order to tap into the future, you have to do that from being quiet and still. Einstein did not invent the theory of relativity. The theory of relativity was there.
Yep.
He tapped into it. See, I believe that, how can I put this? That our real self, our true self, has a way bigger picture for us than our mind. And by letting go of the mind and being present, we can tap into the field. There's the personal field and there's the unified field. There are certain things that want to happen. There are certain things that want to happen. What doesn't want to happen is that the planet is taken out by a nuclear bomb. What does want to happen, I strongly believe, is that we have an enlightened civilization where everybody is thriving. I believe that's what wants to happen. And so all I've got to do is get my mind out of the way and tap into the next step. And sometimes these steps seem to be completely outrageous. Some of the things that people have done in the past are completely outrageous. They led to something amazing.
Yes.
So I believe the quieter your mind is, the more that you tap into intuitive wisdom and guidance. I tell you what, the Raiders of the Lost Ark just came to mind. When he went to walk across that chasm, and there was no net, there was no pathway, and he put one step forward and boom, the net appeared. That expression, leap, and the net will appear. But as long as a person is stuck in their mind, thinking, and by the way, just to go back to something you just said, there are two types of thinking, Mary Lou. One is where you're stuck in the mind. You're saying, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. What a failure. The mind, the monkey mind that just goes over and over and over. What are they going to say? What should I do? What shouldn't I do? Yada, yada, yada. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. There's that type of thinking. And then there's contemplation. There's contemplation, which is contemplating on your life. It's like when you look at the greatest challenge in your life, you look at the lessons that you learned from it, then I believe that's contemplation and that has great value. Now, one of the things, and I'd like to offer this to your audience, anybody who's feeling into what I'm talking about and would like to know more, a couple things. Number one, we have a complementary life perspective. Takes about an hour and a half or so, maybe a little longer. And that is an evaluation of where you are now, where you actually can look at how satisfied you are with different areas of your life. The next step is to become aware of, the areas that are not the way you want them to be. To look at the limiting beliefs and sabotage patterns you have that are creating that not being ideal. And then the third step is to create a vision. a vision that is based on your ideals. It's an amazing process, and you come out of it with a vision, which is a wonderful thing. And in that experience, you also get to learn how to quiet the mind, as I walked you through just before we started.
Which was super cool.
Well,
so for people who are interested in learning more about that, where can they go?
They can call me at 954-873-0144, or they can write me at Susan at SD, which is for self-discovery, lifemastery.com.
Okay. So
channel. I'll send you that link where we have some amazing articles and that technique and just some introductions, some great stuff on that.
Yeah, I'll put these links to connect with you on your show notes page at pyppodcast.com, where I encourage listeners every single time I have an amazing conversation like the one you and I just had to take advantage of the generosity of guests like you, Susan. That's an hour and a half of a deep evaluation is incredibly generous and valuable because, team, you have a choice. You can continue on the path you're on, and maybe you're completely happy, because I do know I have great listeners who are living their purpose. I also know that there are people who haven't reached that yet, still fumbling around, trying to figure it out, maybe a little bit lost. This kind of opportunity to work with Susan in a complimentary session to do a life evaluation is phenomenal. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. If I could just say, it may be with one of my team. I have an amazing team of coaches and trainers. It may be with one of them, depending on my schedule. But the thing is this, if I could just say, there is no limit to how much you're fulfilling your potential.
Mm-hmm.
There is absolutely no limit. There's no limit to how present and aware and enlightened you can be. And many people are going through a lot of challenges. People who seemingly have it all together. They seemingly have it all together. But actually, Jeff Bezos, who you brought up, one of my clients knows somebody who knows him. One thing I can tell you is that there's days he wakes up and he doesn't feel great. I know this. That's not what I'm saying. But I know that everybody has great days and they have not such great days.
That's right.
Thank you for making this available to your listeners, because in my world, it's very simple. The more of us that are more aware and focused on vision and purpose, the faster our vision is going to become a reality, our vision of an enlightened civilization.
That is a great place to wrap this up. I am with you 100%, Susan. Thank you so much for what you do, for bringing light and encouragement and possibility to the Play Your Position podcast. This has been phenomenal.
Well, thank you for making it possible. Thank you for following your dreams and for making this available to so many people. I know that they're getting amazing value from what you contribute.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Got Got a great key offensive strategy you like to share? Write to us at coach@pyppodcast.com or on Twitter, use #PYP and let us know how you're running your ball into the end zone for those game-winning touchdowns.